Hello everybody, Infinite Shinjo here. Welcome to episode 60 of Let's Talk Anime, and thank you for 60 episodes of this. Granted, a couple of them have been my own ideas, but overall it's just been suggestions from you guys, and considering the anime is consistently coming out, I have been able to keep this going for 60 episodes, so hopefully I can keep it going for a whole lot more. But let's get into today's video. So up first is Build Divide Code Black, and this is definitely going to date the video, but at the time I'm recording this, late April, there's a Build Divide Code White, I think it's actually called, and it seems like it's some sort of sequel to it. I don't know at all, but this is the one I'm pretty sure that was suggested to me. I double checked over it, so I'm pretty sure I have it right. So, Build Divide Code Black, I'm just going to call it Build Divide just to make it easier on myself. So, in the show there are three main characters that I met. Teruto, Hiyori, and Sakura. And that's, well, actually no, that's a lie. There are a couple of other characters. But those are the three that I'm essentially focusing on in this video. So for starters, I like Hiyori and Sakura as characters. They're definitely interesting. It's probably not surprising to imagine that Hiyori is my favorite character just because she starts off as kind of a more serious character, but she's basically just a goofball, and I love characters like that. And Sakura is just interesting because, like, she seems to have some underlying reason for doing all this stuff, but at the time that I am into the show, I don't know what it is yet. Granted, I only saw 3 episodes of it, so that's probably way too early to tell. But basically, this is another card game anime. Not to put that in a negative spin, but it is another card game anime. There are a lot of them, and even another one in this episode. But just based off of the card game aspect in general, it reminds me a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially early Yu-Gi-Oh! Since it's just like kind of simple. There's a looming thread in the background, but it's just overall kind of simplistic in a way. And on that note, with the card game aspect, the designs of the monsters are really good as well. There are a lot of them that are just really well designed in my opinion. I'm not exactly keen on a lot of them being humans, or at least looking humanoid, but they still look interesting. Like, not to compare it too much to Yu-Gi-Oh!, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have cards like Dark Magician Girl that definitely are humanoid. But then you have other creatures like Feral Imp, Karibo, monsters that aren't exactly human. Although I guess that's just the take that they took it with Build Divide, so I can't really be upset about that. But on to the things that I didn't like. This probably isn't a good way to start it. I'm kind of mixed on Teruto so far. Like, clearly he's the main character, that's obvious in general. But he definitely has a bigger part in the story, just from what I've seen. He had his memory wiped or something. He definitely has something that he's not sure what role he plays in the story yet. But a lot of it, he just speaks so cryptically, and I'm not even sure what is going on. I would probably be more willing to accept him, but he's just like, he's always kind of a Debbie Downer sort of character. Now granted, to put it in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin, Shay Obsidian from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds kind of spoke very cryptically at the very start of his introduction, and Shay is one of my favorite characters from that show. But, I don't know, just the fact that he always speaks so unclear and never elaborates on it just doesn't appeal to me. And to speak to the card game aspect, I would like it more if I knew how to play the game. Because I'm assuming that it's based off of a real game, because all of these are. But if I knew how to play the game, it would probably matter more. But they just go in, throw you in balls deep, and don't really explain it. And I'm just not the biggest fan of that. And the last thing, tying back into Teruto as a character, I'm not a fan of Teruto having the main focus in all 3 episodes. Now, he is the protagonist, so it makes sense. But, like, he fights Sakura, he fights Hiyori, and then he fights the lion dude. It makes sense, considering he's the main character. But it's just a lot of the same issues that overlap with Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially early Yu-Gi-Oh! Where the main character always has to fight. I like that with other shows like Sevens that's more inventive, where Yuga, the main protagonist from that show, isn't always the one that fights. It might be nitpicks on my part, but those are my opinions. So up next, the second card game anime today, Selector Infected Wixoss. I probably would have pronounced it wrong if they wouldn't have pronounced it in the show, but since they pronounced it in the show, I have no excuse. Where do I begin with this? I guess I can give a brief synopsis of the show. So, you have the main character. I don't know if her name is Ruka or Ruko. I know that the show explained it, but I'm always not entirely sure. I'm just gonna call her Ruka. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But Ruka is a new student at a school. She just moved in. And there's this game called Wixoss that's all the rage, especially with girls. And at first that seems a bit of a trivial thing, but it makes sense the more you get into the show. Then from there she gets a card called... Shoot, I have it as a thumbnail, but I can't remember her name. It's Tama. Tama is the name. And Tama is essentially her spirit partner, in a best way to put it. And all of these other girls that she meets have spirit partners, and they engage in battles that determine who becomes the eternal girl. And all of these girls have their own wish that they want to fulfill, and becoming the eternal girl is the way that they do it. So, just based off of that, if you haven't seen the show, you might be hooked. And to be quite honest, just from watching the first 3 episodes, I really like that premise. It's very appealing, and the second note that I wrote down here is it feels like a successor to Madoka Magica, because Madoka Magica had a similar sort of setup, but it definitely has darker tones to it. Whereas with a show like, I can't remember, I think it's called Magical Girl Sight that came out afterwards, it seems that Magical Girl Sight, compared to Madoka Magica, was a bit of a ripoff from what I've heard. But this just feels like an obvious follow-up to Madoka Magica, a sort of honored tribute, whereas another show could feel like a ripoff, but this just feels really good in a weird way. I like how Madoka Magica was able to take its more normal elements with the darker tones and just blend them together perfectly, and that's the same sort of feeling I get with this show. And the last part, I didn't really mention about Ruka's friend. There's Hitoe and the other girl. The girl right in the middle on the top. I didn't really mention those two. They're fine characters. I would have to see more of them. But Akira, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm going to pronounce it Akira, because if I pronounce it Akira, I'm going to think of the movie. But Akira is such a fun villain. I think... This is hard because, like, I love Akira as a villain, especially since she brings off that bubbly personality, but she can literally say things that cut at your throat and you would have to take a second glance at it. The only thing is I'm not a fan of her just saying words like epic and yo all the time. It just kind of takes away from her character, but that is still an issue for me. But that switch up at the end of episode 3 where she just goes completely bananas makes up for it in a way. I still am not a fan of her saying epic and yo because it does kind of date the anime, but it's still really good. And Jamie Marchi does a good job as Akira. Considering she plays characters like Lucilla in Dragon Maid, that is definitely surprising. But the things I didn't like, and these two kind of tie together, like in Build Divide, I am not entirely sure how it's played. I can get the general idea with some of the moves that they have, like there are different colors that they can combine with, but not knowing the rules does kind of make it rough for me. But at the same time, even though they don't explain the rules clearly, it is a bit of a half and half for me. On the one hand, them not explaining the rules well enough for me means that the games can go for however long that they want. On the other hand, the animation with the fights is really good, so I don't really mind it that much. Honestly, I've gone on record before saying a lot of these topics that I discuss in these videos I don't return to, but this is probably one that I am, because it's just such an appealing setting, such fun characters that I haven't even met everybody yet. The two girls on the outside, I vaguely met the one on the right, but I have not met the one on the left at all, and I'm really excited for the rest of the show. And yes, I did kind of acknowledge it already, but I did watch it in the dub. The characters did a really good job in the dub, by the way. But I am definitely going to continue this when I get a chance, and who knows, it might be one of my new favorites. And also, I do want to bring this up. I didn't want to bring it up at the end of the topics, but I figure it works. I knew of this anime before, because back when I did fan-made opening suggestions, the opening for this was one that I did make. I don't know if it's still on YouTube. It probably isn't because copyright, but I did know of the opening beforehand. It's a really haunting one. That is really cool. But on to the last topic, and since I've covered all the topics up to this point, I came up with one on my own, and it is Spy Family. So yeah, I think I dated this video enough already, so there are only 2 episodes of Spy Family out at the moment. I wanted to give it enough time to meet everybody in the cast. And considering that I basically met the core 3, I feel like it's a good time to discuss it. And who knows, the stuff I discuss might be rectified later on in the show. But where do I begin? With Spy Family, I guess it's probably better to explain the premise, because otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. So, this is currently airing. So it's gonna get 2 different arcs. Like, this one's gonna be 12 episodes, and then it's gonna return in the fall. But the show itself, we have Twilight, the guy on the left, or as he's most commonly referred to as Lloyd Forger. Basically, he's a spy, and in order to infiltrate this party where this big important guy is gonna be at because he's part of a bad group or something, he has to take the disguise as a family man. The only problem, he doesn't have a family. So he adopts Anya, and through very weird circumstances, he marries Yor Forger, and they are the Forgers. And I love that play. I don't know if it was intended. I feel like it was. The fact that their last name is Forger is really good. Like, to forge a signature. If that was a play on that, that's really clever. But where do I begin? The characters are great. I love all 3 of them. It wasn't obvious already, my absolute favorite is Anya. I especially love Megan Shipman doing it in the dub. I've only seen clips of it, but it sounds really good so far. But yeah, probably not a shock that Anya is my favorite, since pink hair characters are a staple on my channel. But the second thing is, this show actually made me care about spies. Like, I never watch anime dedicated to spies. I can't think of the last one that I would. These characters are strong enough on their own that I watch it even though I don't care about the spies. And the last thing, this freaking OP. So, I watched the trailer before it came out, and after it cut into the OP segment where it just played the chorus in the background, I was hooked. And just based off of that little snippet from the trailer, I made a fan-made opening with it. I made a one with Zexal, Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. And after the full version came out, it was right before I went to work one night. I watched that OP, and my gosh, I love that OP so much. I normally don't gush about OPs, but the song itself is really catchy. But the fact that the first part of it up to the chorus is just super simplistic, like a child's drawing, and then when it goes to the chorus and it just goes super detailed with Lloyd and Yor being just spies and assassins. By the way, Yor is an assassin. I probably should have mentioned that too. But it just goes from super simplistic at the start to really detailed in the middle end part. I just really like that. The song itself, I'm a little not sure about. I like the song, it's very catchy, but it's probably not going to crack my top 10. But the animation in it was just really good. You might be wondering, what are the cons that I have? The first thing is, it's still early in the show. There are probably people that are manga readers or light visual, wherever this came from, that are probably nitpicking on stuff already that just is normal with a lot of stuff that gets translated over. And the other thing that I didn't like is some scenes I feel like should have been done a little bit differently. The one that I thought, and the one thing that I found a nitpick for, was in episode 3. Lloyd and Anna are trying to find a new outfit for her. Yor comes in to fix her dress, and Lloyd and Yor explain their own circumstances with why they need to basically interact. And I feel like them actually explaining it to each other while we're seeing it would have been more enjoyable. I guess enjoyable isn't the word, but I feel like it would have made more sense for them to actually explain it instead of just cut that part out and then for them to say, "Ah, I see. That's what you're doing." But I don't know. That's just me. I might be just a nitpick on my part, but at the same time, it's hard for me to find solid negative for the show since it is still going on. But yeah, this is definitely a really good show. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend it. Although I hope that it doesn't go off the rails after 2 episodes. If it does, ignore this video. But that is going to be it for this episode of Let's Talk Anime. Just like every other episode, if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comment section. If you enjoyed, hit a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Momentai.